All right, so early last year, we spoke with Scott Kerman about the state of homelessness in our city. Now, he has a ground level view of our city's drug and housing crisis as the executive director of Blanchet House. That's one of the city's largest nonprofit organizations providing social services in the heart of Old Town Chinatown. Now, since we spoke last, the state, city, and county have moved forward on legislation, policies, and ordinances, all trying to address housing, addiction, and behavioral health needs across Portland. So, we've seen alternative shelters spring up, a 90-day fentanyl emergency declared, Measure 110 rollbacks, a ton of money funneled into new affordable housing. But has any of this actually changed Scott's day-to-day at Blanchet House? We're about to find out. It's Wednesday, May 8th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. The last time we talked was back in February of last year. So long. How have you been?
I've been well, thank you.
Okay.
It's been a long, 14 months.
Yeah, I'm asking how you're doing because it's been such a whirlwind of a year. I believe when we were speaking, Governor Tina Kotek had just signed the executive orders on housing, and since then she's extended it. She enacted a fentanyl state of emergency, all while Measure 110 was rolled back. And then just last month, Portland City Council advanced on their latest version of their camping ban ordinance. Are you seeing any of these changes play out on the ground level in your day-to-day?
That's a really good question. And there certainly has been a lot of political and government activity in the last year, which is in a lot of ways a good thing. I think we're all seeing a lot more collaboration and cooperation between the city and the county and between those two bodies and the state. I think Governor Kotek has used her office to great effect to help bridge differences that had existed between the city and the county. And I think we're all better off given the way our governments overlap in very unique ways in the city of Portland and in Multnomah County, when City Hall and the county commissioners, and particularly the chair, are working together and not at odds with one another. So that's good. That said, how much of that do we see day to day on the street in the work that we're doing? It's really hard to tell. The people we serve are often more impacted by the weather, which will change from day to day here and even throughout the day. We had a beautiful sunny morning for breakfast today. And that really does help uplift everybody's mood, including our own, of course. But then somebody told me there's a 99% chance of rain later today. And if it rains overnight, that means people are going to wake up in the morning wet and soggy and likely in need of new socks and other clothing. So we don't really involve ourselves in the politics and the government, but at the same time, Claudia, we can't insulate ourselves from that, because what our city and county do or don't do certainly in the long run affects us as an organization and especially the people we serve.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is a lot of stuff is happening, but you're still just trying to get them socks.
Yeah, actually, that's perfect. I don't think I could have said that better myself.
When we spoke last, what was going on, there was a lack of clarity. Nobody knew what was going on, really. People, Mayor Wheeler at the time had an idea. The county was against it. It just seemed like a lot of infighting. Do you see a clear vision of what they're doing now?
I see a more comprehensive vision. And one of the things that I see in the recently released Homelessness Response Action Plan is sort of an overt recognition of many challenges and topics that nonprofits have been talking about and raising with our city and county for a number of years now. One thing in particular, for a number of years now, day centers, especially such as Rosehaven and Blanchet House and Portland Rescue Mission, offering services during the day, have been speaking to our local officials about the challenge we face when people are discharged from prison or jail or hospitals back into homelessness.
Right.
That they often show up at our doors sometimes at odd hours when we're not necessarily serving or open,
Hmm.
sometimes still in their hospital slippers, in their scrubs or gown, with maybe a prescription in their hand that they don't know what to do with.
Yeah.
And it puts us in the position of what is our role? I mean, we're not designed to provide wound care or continued medical care. And it puts a significant burden on us as organizations, and it's not really healthy and helpful to the people who we're trying to serve. And in the Homelessness Response Action Plan, this is acknowledged. And this is the first time that I've seen this issue acknowledged in this way, with a commitment from the city and the county, and I imagine with the state's support, to find a way where people can exit prison or the hospital and not end up back on the street or in doorways such as ours.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like a lot of people in our community, they were not aware. They thought that when somebody was having a mental health crisis, they're like, "Oh, they go somewhere." And it's like, "Yeah, for a day."
Right.
For
right.
a day, and then they're right back out
Yeah.
in the same amount of pain they've been in. And now it might be even worse because they've been traumatized.
Well, and I want to be clear, I'm not holding necessarily the jails and certainly not the hospitals, who are overwhelmed in so many ways right now, including their staff, accountable for that.
Oh, yeah. They're just, yeah, it's not their job, ultimately. They're
Right.
not a mental health facility,
But also not just mental health, but people who go to the hospital, go to the ER, who are
Mhm.
homeless for, serious physical issues. One of the things that is, I think, really startling for volunteers who are with us at Blanchet House is the number of individuals we serve with amputations.
Oh, man.
Missing one or both feet or one or both legs. And the reason for this, in probably almost every case, is healthcare related. This is not necessarily trauma from serving in a foreign war and having lost limbs in battle. These are individuals who likely have lost limbs due to infection, due to diabetes,
Yeah.
due to hypertension, due to hypothermia, due to things that would otherwise be preventable if they had dependable access to health care, if it wasn't for their dire poverty.
Well, how is Old Town right now? Because, I mean, that's where your services are focused. Last time on the show, you were just like, well, fentanyl is taking a major toll in my community's population. Like, have things got any better in your neighborhood since we spoke last?
In terms of fentanyl and mental health crisis, things are not better. And maybe in many ways, the situation with fentanyl is worse. But it's also, important to note that this isn't a crisis that's limited to Old Town. This is the neighborhood in which I serve and the one that I am most familiar with. But we are seeing, the challenges of mental health escalation, untreated, serious and persistent mental health, fentanyl use, methamphetamine use, other substances really throughout our community. And two things are really different about fentanyl that makes fentanyl unique. One is that the medical studies are showing that you can go into serious fentanyl withdrawal in as little as about an hour.
Wow.
That is not typical of opioids, including heroin.
Mhm.
So which means that the need to fix, if you have a fentanyl addiction, is almost constant. Fentanyl is also incredibly cheap and incredibly easy to access and use. And then, of course, it is incredibly deadly. It's an anesthetic, right? I
Yeah.
had surgery 2 years ago, and when I was coming out of surgery, they gave me fentanyl, which, when they said that to me, I actually, almost like woke up out of anesthesia. And I'm like, what? What we're seeing is a lot of overdoses, and I have an incredible staff that is ready and willing to run out into the street and administer Narcan and save a person's life.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is Old Town might even be worse than before. Just the amount of overdoses that you're seeing, and also the mental health crisis. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that is true. I mean, at least my opinion is that things are worse. Certainly not better when it comes to fentanyl and the mental health crisis that we're seeing in this district. I also want to say that the district is rebounding in a lot of very important ways.
I was going to ask, I was
right?
like, Scott, I don't know if you know this, but we just did a neighborhood guide with an Old Town, Chinatown resident for like nearly a decade. She loves where she lives. And I'm going to forward you that episode because I think you'd like it. I mean, of course, she acknowledges the issues that you deal with on your day to day, but she was like, I love it here.
Yeah, the entertainment district is doing very, very well. This is still a very thriving place for people much younger than me, I believe, to go out at night and have a good time. I think we're seeing our cultural institutions like the Lansu Chinese Garden and the Japanese American Museum and others starting to bounce back. We're seeing bigger crowds at seasonal festivals that often occur in association with these cultural and historic organizations. We're seeing businesses, especially small businesses with a real kind of unique appeal to younger audiences and shoppers starting to come in. And so there is progress. But Old Town is not really in a position to solve for the fentanyl crisis and the persistent mental illness crisis. We're serving that crisis and we're serving it the best way that we can. But this is a much larger issue that's going to take all of our government resources to address. And that includes the state and likely the federal government.
Yeah.
And I've been saying all along that we have to recognize that progress is going to be challenging. It's going to likely be very expensive, and it's not going to be linear.
Yeah.
We're dealing with human beings, not machines.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take a quick break here. And when we come back, let's talk about Portland street response. I know your team relies on the city's Portland street response, but it's always been precariously funded. How are you feeling now that Mayor Ted Wheeler has promised that he will be fully funding the program?
I'm glad to see that the mayor intends to fund Portland Street Response. It's a critical resource in our community. Speaking for Blanchet House, it might be the only Ghostbusters we have to call when we need help with a situation that is beyond our capacity to serve. If Portland Street Response was to be diminished or go away completely, that would really hurt us. It would really hurt our clients. And I have always believed that if we invest in Portland Street Response, if we give it the opportunity to grow and develop, that this can be something that maybe 5 years down the road, we look back and we say, that was a job well done. That was a really good thing that we did to help our community. But we have to give it time to become what it can be. And that is going to take continued investment and continued refinement of how it's organized and how it's led.
I love that you called it the Ghostbusters, by the way. Like, that is such an interesting comparison.
Well, and by that comparison, what I mean is just sort of like, who are you going to call?
Yeah.
Right. And for years, we've been told you can call this, you can call that. And what we learned over time was not really, there's nobody on the other end of that phone. Mm-hmm. And so Portland Street Response is an entity that when we call, they respond. And we do so much as an organization to support a wide variety of challenges among the people we serve. And we're really proud of that. But there's still a ceiling. And there are times, to use another movie metaphor, that we need to put the bat signal up. Mm-hmm. And right now, who's going to come to Blanchet House to provide that assistance? It's Portland Street Response.
I feel like whenever we see them in the neighborhood, people get so excited. Like, I know that sounds like, but people are just like, hey, like they're just waving at them. So I feel like everyone feels that way. Like everyone's like, they're actually helping and solving an issue in our neighborhood that the police just aren't equipped to do, or they're afraid to call the police because they're just like, this person needs help. They don't need to get tased,
Right. And I think, and I remember when we were talking about instituting Portland Street Response, the police were very transparent about the fact that says they aren't mental health professionals. That's
Yeah, they're
not what
not.
they're designed to do. And I think what happened is maybe we've forgotten why we wanted Portland Street Response, what its intent was. It's there to make sure that anybody who's having a mental health crisis, whether they're housed or not, whether they're living in Old Town or maybe one of the more suburban enclaves of Metro Portland, somebody who's having a mental health crisis where we believe an armed police response is not the best way to address it, that's what Portland Street Response was intended for. So this is what our community wanted, and this is what I think our community will continue to want. And we can't be distracted by maybe the politics of the homeless crisis.
Yeah. Something that we get a lot, Scott, are why aren't people just getting housed immediately? You know what I'm talking about, right? There's like a big housing first initiative. And I looked into it. Seems like a lot of people just talking who don't seem connected to actual services. What would you say to that idea?
So a housing first initiative is an idea that says the best way to solve for homelessness is housing, right? Which is a correct statement. And it acknowledges the fact that we have a significant housing crisis really throughout many areas of our country, and particularly so in Portland and in Oregon overall. We have a lack of affordable housing, and we have rents that have escalated so much that it's driving all kinds of people into houselessness, including senior citizens and single moms and people who otherwise may not have been threatened by houselessness. But the housing situation overall, in terms of the marketplace, it has really turned everything upside down. So how are we going to solve for that? We need to build a lot of housing, and there needs to be housing that can be affordable to people across the spectrum of means in our community. So that's a housing first agenda. To some extent, some advocates for housing first will resist spending money on any other types of shelter or housing that isn't meant to be permanent and supportive.
Yeah.
I don't want to ascribe this to everybody who believes in housing first, but certainly that's one element of it that you see.
I mean, that's what we're getting. We're getting pushback on
Right.
alternative shelters. Like, why are they funding these shelters? And it's like, well, because they're kind of hubs for services, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly agree we need more housing, and that permanent and supportive housing, especially if it really does come with the wraparound supports that people need to be successful in that housing, is a touch point that we need to be aiming for. At the same time, it's going to take a long time to establish this housing and to establish the support systems for the people who will access this housing so that they don't fail in that placement. And so we do need a variety of other short-term and transitional. Blanchet House is in the business of long-term transitional housing. We know firsthand that there are many people who just need a very long ramp to independent living. And this is something that we certainly see among the people we're serving because of how much they have been debilitated by this crisis, how extensive their serious mental illness is, and especially their substance use disorder. I just believe, and there are others in the community who also believe, that there are individuals who will not be ready for independent living for maybe quite some time. And we just have to figure out ways that we can support them to help prepare them to be successful in independent living. So, this is now where you'll hear many leaders in our community saying we need a both and approach. We need to invest in permanent housing, permanent supportive housing, low income and affordable housing. And at the same time, we need to be developing other kinds of shelter and housing opportunities that can help bridge people from here to there.
A both and approach. I really appreciate you saying that because, the homeless population isn't a monolith. It's people who are about to be homeless. It's people who have been on the street for years. It's people with different kinds of issues that are afflicting them that they need, help with. So it does make sense that it needs to be a both and Well, what do you wish our state and city leaders were focusing on to best help the community that you serve that hasn't been discussed?
I hope that we will continue to focus on how we can do better for people with serious mental illness. There are days where I look out in our cafe where we have 60 people at a time eating, and then maybe a couple more dozen people in line at a time. And I don't necessarily see a homeless situation. I see a mental health situation. And I think that we need to do better for people who are suffering really significant mental health challenges. And right now, we just don't have that kind of support in Oregon. We don't have places where people can get treatment in a reliable way. We don't have enough beds. We don't have enough providers. And we have some of the greatest need in the country. So last time we spoke, I'm quite certain we noted that we are last in the country in terms of mental health services and first in the country in need. And that is a very dangerous place to be. I think we're still there. I don't think that has really changed, and certainly not in any substantive or appreciable way. And here's what's coming. We have a serious mental health crisis in our youth and adolescent communities. You just mentioned before, homelessness is not a monolith. We just don't have enough time and space to talk about everybody and everything that needs to be addressed. We have a growing senior citizen community in our country and in our region, and they are becoming our fastest growing segment of housing insecure and homeless. We are so far in the hole in terms of what we need to provide for families with children, especially young children, who are homeless and on waiting lists for maybe 2 or more years to get a placement. And we have a homeless youth crisis, a foster care crisis, which is noted in the Homelessness Response Action Plan. So we've got to do all of it, right? And one of the things I like about the Homelessness Response Action Plan is that it is ambitious. And I think, let's just agree, they're not going to hit all of their targets. But I think it's good to take a big swing and to set our sights high and to be ambitious, because we are just dealing with a mammoth collection of challenges and crises. And I think we need to be really thoughtful about addressing all of it to some appreciable degree.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day to talk through some of these issues. And I love checking in with you. I'd love to do it again another year. I feel like since we spoke last, we have a whole new set of new listeners, and we're going to probably need to keep reminding people like where the community is at, with these issues. So thank you so much for all the work that you do, Scott.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate what you all do on your podcast to bring these attentions to the attention of everybody in our community. And if you want to make this a standing appointment every year, I'd be thrilled to do that.
Every Thursday on the show, we like to bring you a few recommendations to help you plan your weekend. So here's what we got. This Friday night at Lola's Room on West Burnside, there's going to be a Punjabi and Bollywood party in celebration of Vaisakhi. That's the Northern Indian Punjabi Harvest Festival. So there will be DJs and traditional dancing, but everyone is invited as long as you're 21 and over, and vibrant festive attire is encouraged. It goes from 9:30 p.m. till late. Also this weekend, at the Veterans Coliseum, you can support small businesses and local up-and-coming artists and designers at the Unique Markets Portland pop-up. There will be food, photo booths, DJs, a kids zone, and more. Your tickets will get you free drinks, a tote bag, and a few more perks. It goes from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on both Saturday and Sunday. And if you're looking for something free, this Saturday, the 15th annual St. John's Bazaar is taking over St. John's Main Street with 135 craft vendors, several stages for music, a couple of beer gardens, great food, and tons of games and activities for the whole family. The music lineup is crazy this year. Team Dresch is playing along with No Age, Cannibal Ox, and many, many more. The event is free and running from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. You'll most likely see John and I bopping around, so come say hello. For even more local events and news, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Portland. We'll throw all links in the show notes. Well, Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.